They say love can save the world, but she loved and died because of it. She was never allowed to love a human. But hearts don't follow rules. Hers loved anyway. Their love had no place in any treaty between worlds, and the child born of it would become the reason neither side could forgive them. She died during childbirth, not on the battlefield, not from disease, but alone beneath flickering lights of a backwater med station as her heart stopped to give life to something that was never meant to exist. Half human, half alien. A child both worlds considered a mistake. He was there when she died, holding her hand, whispering her name as her breath faded. And then, silence, until the baby cried. From that moment on, he was no longer just a reclusive engineer at the edge of the system. He became a target, not because he'd broken any law, but because he refused to let go of the last piece of her. Earth wanted the child erased. The Galactic Council wanted it neutralized. They said it was a threat to genetics, to stability, to peace itself. But to him, the child wasn't dangerous. It was proof that love had existed even when the stars had turned their backs on it. He didn't run to survive. He ran to keep a promise that he would protect this child, not because of blood, but because in every breath it took, she still lived. The room was dim. Emergency lights pulsed like a dying heartbeat. Metal walls groaned under the weight of the storm outside. The air smelled of ozone, blood, and something unspoken. Elias knelt beside her, his hands shaking. Lyra's skin shimmered faintly violet, blue, silver-like starlight trapped beneath the surface. Her breath came in shallow gasps. Her fingers twitched. "Just hold on, Lyra, please. You're almost there." Her eyes found his, glowing faintly through the haze of pain. She reached for his face with what strength she had left. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "Don't let them take him. Promise me." Then her body tensed, a final shudder passing through her. Silver blood spread beneath her like liquid moonlight. The monitor flatlined. Silence. And then, a cry. A child's cry. Not entirely human. Not entirely alien. Small, glowing softly. Tiny ridges of unknown origin traced his spine. His eyes, open brown, familiar, heartbreakingly human, and stared straight at Elias. "You're real." Elias gathered the child into his arms. His tears came freely now, mixing with the rain that began to seep through the cracked roof above. For a moment, the war ended. For a moment, everything stopped. Then the terminal sparked. A voice, cold and synthetic, filled the room. Unregistered genetic hybrid detected. Transmission uplink initiated. He froze. One glance at Lyra, then movement. Fast. He ripped the baby blanket from the table, wrapped it around the newborn, grabbed the data core from the console, and tore the uplink cable out of the wall. Sparks flew. The red light blinked one last time. Too late. A ping echoed into orbit. Far away, somewhere in the cold void above, a transmission was received. "Biological breach. Sector 9, possible hybrid." A reply came. Flat. Ruthless. "Send everything. Terminate on sight." Rain poured harder now. Elias stood at the threshold, baby held tight against his chest. His boots hit the mud. His breath came in clouds. "I don't care what you are. I'm not losing you too." And he ran into the storm, into the unknown, chased by every power in the galaxy. But not yet broken. Not while she still lived in the child. The storm tore through the scorched forest like a starving beast. Rain lashed against the blackened earth, where burned tree stumps still smoldered under the dark sky. Lightning split the clouds, lighting up each desperate step Elias took as he ran. In his arms, the child slept. A soft glow pulsed beneath its skin, faint but unnatural. Steam rose where the light touched the rain. Elias lowered his face, pulling the jacket tighter around the child, hiding that glow like a secret the galaxy could never know. Far off in the distance, engines roared through the sky. Searchlights cut through the storm, recon crafts. Some human, some not. Elias ducked into a narrow crevice between two jagged cliffs. High above, spherical drones floated across the storm front, scanning the valleys below. Red lights swept across the terrain. Heat signatures flickered and vanished. He held his breath, pressed his back against stone, The baby's breath was soft, like wind through trees. The light passed. No detection. Elias looked skyward, rain blurring his vision. He whispered to no one but the night. "We'll get out of here, I swear it." A soft beep came from the small device strapped to his hip, Lyra's memory core. The words flickered onto the soaked, flickering screen. Final message ready to play. He hesitated. The child stirred in his arms. Then he nodded, shielding the baby and pressing the button. Lyra's voice emerged, ragged, faint, but unmistakably hers. "Elias, if you're hearing this, I didn't make it. The child in your arms, it isn't something either of our worlds would ever accept. But if he lives, Elias, he could be the bridge, the first real reason they might start to see each other differently. If you have to run your whole life to keep him alive, I'm sorry. One day, you'll have to let him choose for himself." The message ended. A cold wind swept through the crevice like the breath of a world that no longer believed in love. Elias closed his eyes, tightened his grip around the child. "Number, he won't run forever. I'll give your son a place to begin again, or I'll die protecting him." The baby shifted again, its eyes opened bright, knowing. And in that brief flicker, Elias saw something science couldn't explain. The child wasn't looking at him. It was looking at the future. And in that future, there were no humans. Elias moved through the rain until his legs gave out beneath him. The jungle ahead was darker, stranger. Trees with spiraled trunks twisted up into the clouds, their leaves glowing with bioluminescent veins. The air was heavy with moisture and scent, wet moss, metallic dust, and something that felt like memory. He ducked beneath the roots of a massive alien tree, sheltering in a hollow thick with steam. His back hit the bark. It was warm, alive. The baby stirred again. Its skin flickered with light, not just random pulses. A rhythm, a signal. Elias stared, chest heaving. "I know," he whispered. "I feel it too." He unzipped the jacket slightly. The baby blinked up at him, eyes calm, ancient. For a moment, Elias wondered if it really was just a child, or something far more. Suddenly a crack. Movement. He drew the old plasma sidearm from his belt. A trembling hand held it steady toward the shadows outside the tree. "Show yourself." A silhouette emerged. Not human, but close. Humanoid in shape, armored in matte black cloth that shimmered with kinetic shielding. The figure raised its hands slowly. "I won't hurt you," she said. Her voice was steady, low, and oddly familiar. Elias didn't lower the weapon. "Back away." "You're Elias Venn," the woman said. He froze. "How do you know my name?" "I was with her," the woman said gently. "With Lyra, I helped extract her from the core worlds." Elias's heart stuttered. "That's not possible." She took one slow step forward. Lyra knew this would happen. She planned for it. She told me if she didn't make it, I'd find you here. "I don't trust you." "You shouldn't," she said, "but I brought something." She reached behind her slowly and tossed a small object into the dirt between them. It slid to a stop near Elias's foot. A data crystal. He stared at it. Lyra's voice echoed in his memory. "One day, you'll have to let him choose for himself." The woman knelt in the mud. "My name is Rin. I'm not part of your war. I'm part of something older. Something waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For him." She pointed at the child. And in that instant, the baby's glow changed from soft blue to golden white. The jungle around them shivered. The tree beneath Elias pulsed. He looked down. The baby wasn't just glowing. It was responding. To her. To the place. To something ancient beneath the soil. Rin led them deeper into the jungle. The path wasn't visible, not to the eye, but she moved like she'd walked it 100 times. Trees bent away from her presence, leaves brushing against her armor like they remembered her. Elias followed cautiously, the baby bundled tight against his chest. His sidearm never fully lowered. The air grew denser, warmer, electric. They entered a canyon cloaked in shadow. Vines hung like curtains. Bioluminescent moss lit their steps. Then a cliff wall, blank, smooth, impossible. Rin placed her hand on the stone, whispered something in a language Elias didn't understand. The rock trembled. A seam split down the center and light bled out from within. The wall opened. A hidden chamber revealed itself, massive, hollow, glowing from within with golden veins of ancient tech, symbols etched into every surface. Floating orbs of light hovered in the air, pulsing like heartbeat monitors. The architecture was unlike anything Elias had ever seen, not human, not hers. Older, Rin turned. This is where she wanted him to be born. You mean Lyra? She wanted to bring him here herself. But we ran out of time. Elias stepped forward, eyes wide. What is this place? She stared at the walls. It's called an echo vault, a memory repository left by a species long gone. Some say they built the first gates. Others think they were wiped out in the first collapse. But their structures remain. And sometimes they react. React to what? Rin looked at the child. To him. As if on cue, the child blinked. The glow from his skin pulsed once, twice. Then the entire vault responded. Lights flared, symbols shifted. A low harmonic hum filled the air. The floating orbs aligned into a perfect circle. Elias held the child tighter. What's happening? Rin didn't answer. She walked to the center of the room to a pedestal. Place him here. Number. He'll be safe. Number. She looked back. This isn't about trust, Elias. It's about purpose. He doesn't belong to either of our worlds, and this place knows it. Elias hesitated. The child cooed softly, not in fear, but in recognition. Then, without a sound, Elias stepped forward, laid the child on the pedestal. Silence. Then light exploded outward. The vault lit up, the walls glowed, and in the air above the pedestal, a holographic projection flickered into life. A figure alien, robed, translucent eyes closed in meditation. Then it spoke. Not in words, in thoughts. A shared mind link. Elias staggered. He saw flashes, stars collapsing, planets forming, species rising and falling, and then the child. Standing not as a baby, but as something older, wiser. Surrounded by hundreds, no, thousands kneeling before him. Then, war. Fire. A world burning. He fell backward, gasping. The vision faded. The projection dimmed. Elias looked at Rin. What was that? She stared, voice quiet. A glimpse. A glimpse of what? She met his eyes. Who he becomes. Above the planet in low orbit, the silence broke. A satellite that should have been blind flared to life. Encrypted systems, dormant for centuries, suddenly pulsed awake. Streams of alien data poured through the void, raw, primal, ancient, not meant for human eyes. Inside a hidden command ship belonging to the Earth Dominion Fleet, alarms blared. Unknown signal received from Sector 9. Echo architecture signature detected. A woman in full military dress turned sharply to the screen. Commander Isolde Varus, ruthless, brilliant, known for destroying 2 rebel moons without civilian casualties, and for never allowing an anomaly to go unresolved. Trace it, she ordered. The technician blinked. We tried. The signal bounced through alien relay points we've never mapped. Then, it vanished. Isolde's lips barely moved. Show me what triggered it. A still image loaded. A flickering silhouette in a golden-lit chamber. At the center, a glowing child. Not a threat. Not a weapon. But something far worse. A variable. She turned. Prep a strike team. I want that child alive. Everything else is expendable. Far below, inside the Echo Vault, Elias stumbled out of the mind link. His skin was pale. Sweat soaked his clothes. The child still lay on the pedestal, quiet, almost asleep, as if the vision had taken something from him too. Rin knelt beside them. What did you see? Elias wiped his face. A city burning, a voice calling out, begging him not to choose. Choose what? I don't know. But he had to choose between them. One side lived, one side didn't. Rin nodded slowly, eyes dark. I was afraid of that. What does it mean? She looked toward the opening above where the light from the jungle filtered in. It means we're out of time. A low rumble echoed through the cavern. Not thunder. Engines. She stood quickly. They found us. Elias moved to the pedestal, scooping the child into his arms. The glow dimmed, like the baby was conserving energy. Outside, a bright beam swept over the cliffside. Drop pods fell from the sky like iron rain. 6, no 8. Black armored soldiers hit the ground hard, moving with precise, merciless speed. Elias turned to Rin. You said he wasn't from either world. I did. Then who the hell is he from? Rin's expression changed not fear, but reverence, and a touch of guilt. From something that came before us all. A second boom. Closer. Inside the vault, the floating orbs began to flicker wildly. The walls pulsed with the child's heartbeat, symbols rearranged, forming something like a warning. And in that moment, the child opened his eyes. Golden, bright, terrifying. The vault began to breathe. Lights along the walls surged with the rhythm of the child's pulse. Symbols glowed like fire, etched into stone. The ground shook, not violently, but rhythmically, like a slumbering beast beneath the earth had just stirred. Rin turned to Elias. We can't fight them. I wasn't planning to. He adjusted the baby against his chest, heart pounding. Outside, the sound of boots hitting wet stone echoed into the chamber. Voices barked over comms, crisp, military, human. Sector breach confirmed. Energy readings unstable. Eyes on the vault. Rin drew her weapon. Not a gun, a curved blade, humming with low-frequency energy. Elias stared. You're going to take on soldiers with a knife? She gave a small, humorless smile. If I get close enough, they won't have time to shoot. He looked down at the child. And if you don't? The vault trembled again. This time, the symbols on the walls rearranged, forming a circle behind the pedestal. The light inside it shimmered like water. A portal. Rin's eyes widened. The vault, it's opening a gate. Elias stepped toward it. Where does it go? She shook her head. No one knows. The echo vaults don't lead to coordinates. They lead to places that remember. That's not helpful. It might be the only way you survive. A shadow passed overhead. The entrance to the chamber exploded inward, a shock wave of kinetic force slamming into the far wall. A soldier stepped through, visor scanning, weapon raised. Elias didn't wait. He ran. Toward the circle of light, another soldier entered, then another. Gunfire erupted. Sparks flew as a bolt grazed Rin's shoulder. She lunged, blade meeting armor. The scream that followed wasn't human. Elias dove through the circle just as a second blast split the pedestal behind him. Light swallowed him whole. Cut to black, silence. Then, a soft hum. Elias landed on stone. Rough, ancient. But the air was calm, still. The child in his arms didn't cry, didn't glow, just looked up at him with wide, golden eyes. He was no longer on the jungle planet, no longer in known space. Around him stood towering pillars made of starlight and glass. A sky above that shimmered like a living nebula. He turned slowly and saw them. Dozens of figures translucent, cloaked, watching from the mist. Not human, not alien, something older. One of them stepped forward, spoke, not with words, but thought. You have arrived too soon, Elias Ven, but the child, he is right on time. Elias stood in stillness, his breath catching. The air shimmered not like heat, but memory. Every movement seemed to echo twice, once in sound, once in light. The pillars around him pulsed faintly with starlight, casting reflections that danced across the marble floor like ripples on water. He held the child tighter. Its glow had softened to a steady pulse, golden and calm. The figures surrounding him remained silent, tall, robed, translucent. Their faces were concealed, not by masks, but by distortion, as if reality refused to focus on them. One of them stepped forward. Elias didn't speak, didn't breathe. Then, a voice, but not in his ears, in his thoughts. The vault chose to send you here. That is no accident. Elias answered aloud, voice raw. What is this place? A place that remembers. Remembers what? Beginnings and ends. He looked around. The space stretched infinitely, yet felt intimate, like a cathedral built inside the skin of a dying star. The child stirred in his arms. Then, from somewhere ahead, a massive doorway began to open. Behind it, not machinery, not architecture, but a field of stars. And in the center, a structure, floating, ancient. A bridge of light stretching between galaxies. The watcher turned to Elias again. You call him hybrid. You fear what he might become. Elias stepped back. He's just a child. Number. He is a key. A key to what? To memory, to divergence, to survival. The watcher gestured, and from the ceiling or sky, a thread of light descended, forming a circle. Within it, visions. Elias saw Lyra, pregnant, smiling, then burning skies. Then the child standing at the edge of a world, arms outstretched, and two armies below, both on their knees. Then, silence, and a void. Elias staggered. You're saying he chooses whether we live or die? Number. He chooses who deserves to remember. Elias clenched his fists. You expect me to hand him over to you? We do not take, we record. The choice is still his. But now that he's entered this place, he will begin to understand. The child opened his eyes. Golden light spilled outward, casting shadows across the stars. And for a moment, just a moment, Elias saw his reflection in the boy's eyes. But it wasn't him. It was something greater, something older, something that wore his shape. Then the voice whispered again. He carries you within him, Elias, as he carries her. But in the end, he will carry us all. The chamber dimmed. The golden glow faded to a pale, suspended hush, like the world itself was holding its breath. The watchers remained still, silent, waiting. In Elias's arms, the child stirred. But this time, he didn't cry. He lifted his head slowly, deliberately, and looked at the watchers. His eyes no longer held the innocence of a newborn. They held knowledge, recognition, and then sound returned. A sharp crack echoed through the vault, unnatural, not part of the memory. A breach. Another. Then, a rift tore open near the edge of the cathedral-like chamber. Sparks of broken matter spiraled outward. And through it, armored figures in black. Human, Dominion, armed. Commander Isolde Varas stepped through the rip in space, her weapon drawn, eyes sweeping the impossible room with cool detachment. What the hell is this place? She muttered, then spotted them. Elias, the child, the watchers. She didn't hesitate. Secure the hybrid. Take the man alive if you can. The soldiers advanced. Elias backed away, clutching the child tight. Stay behind me, he whispered, though it made no sense. The watchers did not move. But the child blinked once, and something changed. The vault responded. The symbols on the walls lit again. The light behind the watchers pulsed like a second heartbeat. Commander Isolde raised her weapon. Step away from it. Now. But she never got the chance to fire. The child reached out a single hand. And reality bent. Not violently, not with fire or force, but like an edit in a memory. The soldiers paused mid-step. Confused. Uncertain. Then they began to vanish one by one, erased like dust brushed from an ancient page. Elias stared in horror. What is he doing? The watcher's voice echoed in thought. He is not destroying them. He is forgetting them. He chooses what remains. Commander Isolde stumbled backward, terrified for the first time in years. No, that's not possible. She reached for her comm. The child looked at her. She vanished. Silence again. Elias sank to his knees. The child leaned forward, touching his father's cheek. And for a moment, Elias felt everything. All of it. Lyra's love. The war. The vault. The dying stars. A future in which nothing remembered who they were. And another future one the child had not yet chosen. Elias whispered, trembling, "What are you?" The child blinked once, then smiled, and whispered back a single word. Story. Light fell like dust. Not from a sun, but from the memory of one. Elias stood alone in the vault, the space around him now quiet, endless. The watchers had withdrawn into the shadows, leaving only him and the child, who no longer glowed, no longer looked newborn, no longer looked helpless. Just watching. Still. Timeless. Elias dropped to the ground, exhausted. His voice cracked as he looked at the boy. You could have killed them. The child didn't respond. You could have destroyed me too. Still nothing. Then he took Elias's hand, and the world unraveled. The vault dissolved. Elias blinked. He stood in a field. Golden light touched the horizon, where twin suns dipped low against the edge of a rebuilt world. Cities stood in silence, clean, harmonious. Above them, ships flew in peace, not war. And in the sky, massive banners waved, a symbol not of Earth, not of alien nations, but a fusion of both. A new emblem, one Elias had never seen. But the people, they bowed to it. To someone, footsteps echoed behind him. He turned. It was the child older now, maybe 12, maybe 200. Radiating strength, compassion, and something deeper. Purpose. This is a possibility, the child said. One of many. Elias stared in disbelief. You brought me into the future? Number A story of it. A version that may live, if I choose to remember it. Elias touched the air. The light bent around his fingers, like paper memories waiting to be written. You can do this, he whispered. The child looked down. I can, but I may also remember a different ending. He raised his hand, and the field collapsed into a storm of stars, scattered, unfinished. They were back in the vault. The vision was gone. Elias reached out. Then tell me, what do you want? For the first time, the child hesitated. Not because he was afraid, but because no one had ever asked. Then, a single tear slid down his glowing cheek. I want to know her. Elias's breath caught. Lyra? She gave everything for me, but I don't know her face. I only know the feeling of being loved without knowing why. Elias took him into his arms, and something strange happened. The vault pulsed not in power, but in emotion. Memory. A holographic shimmer filled the air and Lyra appeared. Not as a warrior, not as a diplomat, just Lyra, smiling, laughing, whispering things to Elias in a language no one else would ever hear. The child stared. Tears fell, glowing as they hit the marble. Then silence, and he whispered, I will remember her. The vault responded. Lights faded. Symbols faded. Only the child remained shining softly, hand in hand with the man who had never stopped protecting him. The vault had quieted. Its walls no longer pulsed. The light had dimmed to a deep, almost sacred stillness. There was no more time to run, no more enemies to fight, only choice. The child stood in the center of the chamber, small but shining. His hands still held Elias's, not as protection now, but as connection. Elias knelt beside him. I don't know what comes next, he said softly. I do, the child answered, but I wish I didn't. He turned toward the watchers, who had returned silent, faceless, timeless. You asked me to choose, the child said. The watchers said nothing. Not between survival and destruction, but between remembering and forgetting. He stepped forward, voice steady. There are worlds that will never accept me, races that will always see me as a mistake, a child of silence, a fracture. But I know her now. I know what she gave for me to exist, and I know what he have looked to Elias gave to protect me, even when he had nothing left. A moment. Then his voice changed deeper, older, echoing across the walls of the vault. So I will choose. The walls lit up, symbols rearranged. The vault began to hum once more. I will not erase the war. I will not erase the pain. Because pain is what shaped the love that made me. But I will forget the hate. The light intensified, not white, but warm. Like fire that does not burn, only cleanses. The watchers bowed. Across the galaxy, things began to change. Not suddenly, not loudly, but deeply. Memories rewrote themselves. Files vanished. Statues crumbled. Old war records, gone. The Dominion would wake the next day not knowing why their database had a single blank sector marked redacted. Aliens who had hated humanity would weep at a feeling they couldn't name. And children born the following year would draw stars merging with Earth without being taught. Because he had chosen what to remember. And what not to. Back in the vault, the light faded. The child turned to Elias. It's done. Elias looked at him, heart full and breaking. Where will you go? I don't know yet, the child smiled. but I want you to live long enough to see the story unfold. Elias's eyes filled. Will I ever see you again? The child stepped forward, placed a hand over his chest. You'll see me in them, in anyone who feels like they don't belong but dares to stay anyway. A pause. Then, with one final smile, he whispered, Tell them I was real. The vault began to dissolve. Not violently, just fading. Like a dream you remember for the rest of your life. She wasn't supposed to love him. The child wasn't supposed to exist. And Elias was just an ordinary man, with nothing but his hands and a promise. But love happened. A child was born not of war, but of hope. And that man protected him, not for power, not for duty. Just because that's what a father does, asterisk. When the entire galaxy hunted that mistake, the child didn't destroy. He didn't rage. He simply chose what deserved to be remembered, and what could finally be forgotten. No weapons, no crown, just a memory of his mother's smile, and a father who stood beside him when no one else would. And somehow that was enough. This wasn't just a story about a half-alien child. It was a story about memory, about forgiveness, about how even the smallest presence can rewrite the course of everything when it is loved enough. If you've ever felt like you didn't belong, if you've ever thought this world wasn't made for you, then remember this. Sometimes, the things that shouldn't exist are the very ones that save us all. And stories like these, they're just beginning, waiting for you right here.